right, everybody, welcome back to the 42284 podcast. Thanks, everybody that's listened and gave us a compliment. Our email is the 42284podcast@gmail.com. Please like, subscribe, rate, and share us wherever you listen. We decided we kind of jumped into the first episode without a good intro, so I'm Brandon. I live in Sunfish with my wife and 2 children. We have a small farm here where we raise a few beef cattle and some hay when I'm not busy with my public job. I'm going to turn it over and let Jeremy introduce himself.
So my name's Jeremy Durbin. I am not the same Jeremy Durbin as lives by the Catholic Church in Sunfish. We get confused, have our whole lives.
You don't lay brick?
No, I don't lay brick. He's the mason, excellent mason. If you need any brickwork, he's the man.
I agree.
So I live in Dixon, Kentucky now. I grew up in Sunfish. Lived here until 2014-ish. Still own property here. But I live down in Dixon with my wife, Lindsay. I have 3 children and 2 stepchildren. They are 12, 13, 16, 17, 19, so we've got a house full. Working in electric utility, that's really all I've ever done. And just, grew up with a lot of the history around Sunfish, and it's very interesting to me, and so I want to help spread that is my want, and have some good laughs. I mean, we've been in this room 15 minutes already, and I mean we could have recorded the show in this, right?
Yeah.
So
we could have got it started earlier.
Right? Yeah, I mean we all grew up together. Like Brandon said, we want to thank everybody who has reached out and said, hey, this is great, this is funny, please like, and even word of mouth. Don't forget word of mouth. Ask your buddies if you've heard this or not. It's really more about spreading history for us and good stories. So, Kyle?
Those are our hosts. Proud that they started this. Really glad for that.
Kyle's a host too.
Kyle's moved up.
He's got the badge, the brand.
I'm just a guest. I'm just a reoccurring guest. I'll just be a reoccurring guest.
Oh, he's the Donnie Baker. He is the Donnie Baker of the bunch.
My name is Colin White. I live here in Sunfish. As I said on the first episode, we moved up here in about 89. So not a lifelong resident, but started my first few years in Huff, just down the road a few miles. I live here with my wife, Heather, my 2 children, Knox and Honor. We run a small farm also. My mom owns a lot of ground, a few acres of ground that she row crops, leases out row crops. I've got some cows on what's 2 sidling that would turn over a combine. That's probably why the only reason I get to run the cows on that. And I love my community. I can't say enough. Everywhere I go, I have a job that takes me across the state, and everywhere I go, I don't tell people that I'm from Brownsville, and nothing wrong with Brownsville. I love Brownsville, but I tell people I'm from Sunfish, Kentucky. I'm proud to have grown up here. I'm proud of my neighbors. There's not, you go up and down the road, and if you need help, they are there to help you. And growed up with these guys and love them. And this guest that's here today, I tell you, I really think of him just like a great-great-grandfather. That's
age-wise,
yeah. I really think a lot of him.
Yeah.
Oh, knock the... Push that button.
Back to what you said about loving the community.
Yes.
I feel the same way. I mean, I am proud. I am from Sunfish.
Yes.
I'm not from anywhere else.
Yes.
I live somewhere else.
Yes, sure.
And, I work for a large company now, and there's not, I'm going to say, a week that goes by that I do something and somebody says, oh, you're making Sunfish proud now, I mean, they know. Most of them have never been there, couldn't point it out on the map, but they know a lot about it because I'm telling them stories just like we're telling. I mean, they've heard these stories before, so.
I guarantee they've not heard some of them.
Not some of them, but a lot of them. So.
Not on this episode.
Yeah.
I have looked forward to this guest.
Elbow him, wake him up over there.
I got your wake up.
I knew this was going to be a guest that we could have that would definitely gain us some listens. His dad was a staple in this community for years.
Founding father.
And it's been said that he is more like his dad than his dad was. I believe I'll just let Kyle introduce him because Kyle can probably do a better job introducing him than I can because he probably knows a little more about him. And then, Kyle, you can turn him loose and And I let Colin know that I wanted to hear a little about some family history of sunfish and stuff, but I'll let you introduce him.
You better watch the introduction, buddy.
The man, the myth, the legend.
I've heard about it. This is
Yeah,
the
that's
first
good enough.
time.
Is that okay? Is that all right?
That's great.
So
15 minutes ago is the first time I've ever met this man.
And you
I
already
knew
like
I
him?
knew his dad well, and I like him, and I can tell he's a lot like his dad. I think that's an honest statement.
Well, growing up, when I was little, I called him Coley Poley,
Yeah.
but his name is Colin White. He is, he's been my dad's first cousin. My dad's dad, my Papa Kurt, and Colin's dad, Gene, which I call him Uncle Gene, and I don't know anybody in the community that doesn't call him
Heck,
Uncle
I
Gene.
wasn't kin to him. That's what I called
You
him.
called him
Yeah,
Uncle Gene.
everybody called him
Everybody
Uncle
calls him
Gene.
Uncle Gene. If
Even
anybody
me.
talks about Gene White, they don't say Gene White. They say Uncle Gene.
Right.
Or Unc.
Or Unc. Yeah, I call him Unc a whole lot. I was Unc's great nephew, and as he used to say, I don't know what's so great about him. That's how he would introduce me. So I'll do a little better job with Colin. This is my second cousin, I guess is what he would be, Colin White. And he's the oldest son of my Uncle Gene. And I'll just let him tell a little bit about himself, and we'll probably interject at some point.
You won't interrupt. You'll interject.
Interject.
Okay, that's good enough.
That's a better word.
Yeah, especially for you.
I looked that up today.
Did you? Well,
Just helped him out.
I guess I have to live up to my legend. You said.
That's what I said. You
Yeah.
said do you a good job.
I think
No pressure.
I don't know about the legend part. Anyhow, my name is Colin White. They got that part right this time. And I live in Sunfish, Kentucky. And unlike these other three people, I don't do anything. I'm fully retired, and if I don't want to get up in the morning, I don't get up.
We strive to get there.
That's what we're looking for.
We're looking for.
Well, I'm happy when my eyes do open because I think,
Right.
"Phew, wow, another day. Made it. But I was born right up off of Sunfish Round Hill Road, April the 10th, 1950. Kyle remembers the day quite well.
I was sitting on the front porch.
Sitting. But I tell you what, your papaw, Brandon, he probably was sitting on his porch.
That's
Yeah.
He always sat on the porch. But I lived with my grandmother and grandfather most of my young life. Chloe and Jess White. They lived many places I can remember. They lived in Cub Creek, and they lived just south of South. Somebody said, "You sure it wasn't north of South?" I said, "No, it's south of South."
Yeah.
Did they live back behind Mary Ellen Hayes on that farm, back up the creek?
Yes.
Yes.
I thought that's what.
That-
At
Mary Ellen-
one time, and the only reason I know that is because Uncle Gene had me go up there and bush hog where they lived because he had a metal detector trying to find his marbles that he buried to hide from Kurt.
Yes, that's a true story. Yeah.
I loved when he was doing that because I would tell everybody that Unc lost his marbles.
Yes.
And was
But every-
truthful in it.
Yeah, and everybody knew that. You know, but that's where back there in that area is where your great grandmother lived. One of the most beautiful women in the world, just not on the outside but on the inside. Mrs. French was. I never met a nicer lady than Mrs. French until my Aunt Dorothy came along, which happened to be Mrs. French's daughter.
Okay.
It must run in the family.
Yeah.
Because they were sweet people.
Yeah, I was both their favorites.
But one thing that was brought up last week was how Sunfish got its name. Well, now, I was told from my grandfather as I was growing up, because I thought the same thing. I said, "Grandpa, how did Sunfish get its name?" He looked down at me and he says, "Well, wise grandson." I think he said very wise.
Very well.
Very wise
very
grandson.
handsome.
Handsome too. Yeah. And that goes out to all you women. I am single, and I'm sure that if you, well, anyway, we'll talk about that later. But
We'll put his phone number at the end.
yeah, put my phone number at the end.
On the YouTube channel,
Yeah.
definitely.
But you have to send me a picture first. I just don't go on blind dates. But my grandfather said, well, the reason Sunfish got its name was because of the creek, Sunfish Creek. And I said, because I used to fish that creek. Used to swim in it, and I even bathed in it. bar soap. And
Been there, done that in that creek.
Well, sure. I mean, we didn't have running water. We didn't have any of this electricity stuff. We didn't have no light bulbs to change or anything like that. So come springtime, we'd get down there at the creek, and that's where we bathed. Now, Grandma, bless her heart, she was the hardest working woman I ever known. She would take us kids in the evening, and she'd be boiling some water, and she'd get that washcloth, and she'd wash your face and ears real good and stuff, And my grandma, she had on her right hand, her index finger was bent like this. And I've asked her as I was growing up, and she told me all kinds of crazy stories, but anyhow, she would put that cloth in her hand, and she'd start washing your face with this finger, gouging you and poking you. So, Grandma, take it easy. You're going to kill me.
Get hung in the ear. And
I'll get I'll get that ear. But I've fished that little place and I walked up and down that creek many a time. There used to be a patch of bamboo down in that area, and me and my sister's brother, the little one,
yes,
we would cut some bamboo and we'd make our fishing pole.
Cane pole.
Cane pole.
Right.
Yeah, there's still cane
yeah.
back there.
Well, we didn't know anything about these rod and reels and,
Did you ever swim in Devil's Pocket? Do you remember that name?
I do not remember that name.
So back, it'd be south of the round, or I guess it'd be south, downstream with the round bottom, there's a big hollowed out sycamore tree. And I mean, it's huge. And it is hollow, and we were kids, we would get in that thing and play, and they always called it Devil's Pocket.
And it's a little deeper hole.
And it's a deeper hole of
there
water.
in the creek.
And so I grew up thinking that we had named it that. And so John A.'s two sisters were in the convent up in Cincinnati, and we went to visit them. It would have been in 2006, and they had a picture hanging on their wall of them as kids, little kids, all up in that tree, and had Devil's Pocket wrote over it. And I said, well, I always thought we named it that. And she said, honey, my parents went there on dates as, that was a thing. Go get your girlfriend, take her on a date back there to fish back in the, turn of the century.
Is that what they told you, fish?
Yeah,
okay.
That's what we were calling it.
Just wondered.
So anyhow, I thought maybe you had heard that, which is further downstream than where you all were at.
No, I tell you, the deepest hole that we used to swim in and goof around in is you go up there to the cemetery, Cub Creek Cemetery, and you go across that little bottom, and right there, sunfish runs right through there. And right there, as you cross over...
you're probably in Bear Creek right there.
Am I in Bear Creek?
Yeah, I'd say you're in Bear Creek, because sunfish empties out into Bear Creek just right down.
Okay, well, then it'd be above.
Yeah, you're
be above sunfish. Yeah. But there's a natural spring right there as you cross one field into the other field.
That would come off like Warren's old farm, right? Or am I thinking...
Well,
farther. Yeah, it probably would, but you're farther down there.
But it could be 100 degrees outside, and we used to, up there by the cemetery, in that hill that we've donated for the other cemetery, Grandma would take us up there and make us pick blackberries. Hot blackberries, and mosquitoes and chiggers, and we'd get done and we'd walk down there, and this was a pretty good sized spring, and we would jump in there and take a breath. Oh, it was cold. It was like 50-some degrees, even when it was 100 degrees outside. But the reason Sunfish Creek is named Sunfish Creek is because...
The sunfish.
Because of the sunfish in the creek.
The perch. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's 5 or 6 different breed of fish, bluegill, red ear, sunfish.
I remember catching northern pike out of that creek as a kid.
Well, that was...
You would drag one of those up and it had those teeth, and they were 8-9 inches long.
I don't know if they got them in there anymore, though.
I bet you'd do good to catch something like that.
Oh, yeah, I'd probably do good to catch sunfish.
The sunfish are like a cousin of bluegill, right?
Similar to
bluegill.
It's a perch.
Just got the yellow belly.
It is. It's a perch family, but it's got a real yellow belly.
Yeah.
It looks kind of like the sun.
Yeah.
So, i.e. the sunfish. But that's... And I heard from someone else, old-timer, that the Indians actually named it because they used to fish there and catch the sunfish.
Oh,
So that part,
I
I
believe
don't,
that.
100% sure about that. But my family's been down here. In fact, I was up at the cemetery today. My great grandfather was the first one buried there. It was his land. He donated the land for the cemetery, and he was the first one born. And I noticed
At Cub Creek.
Cub Creek
Okay.
Cemetery
Yep.
that his date of birth was 1824, and so obviously his parents, which would have been my third great grandparents, they had to be around there someplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they just had a kid.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go to Florida or nothing, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But our family has been here for well over 200 years. Most of them are dead.
They might get a kick out of this. Tell them your papa's name, Grandpa Jess's dad.
Pinkley.
Pink, yeah. And
Pink.
But they called him
Pink.
So
Pink.
we had a grandfather named Pink White.
Yeah. And hey, you guys think it's that funny? Which one of you want to step out first?
It's Brandon's turn. I've already got a
Brandon,
dose of it. when
he's
I
already
come
got a
in, yeah.
dose of it?
It's Brandon's turn.
But
His
we
name was
had-
Pinkney White, but everybody called
Yeah.
him Pink White. You remember Pink Higgs?
Yeah, Pink
yeah,
Higgs.
I remember.
Pink was,
I know
so
the
they
name,
were
yeah.
cousins, and Pink was named after that same grandfather.
Exactly. Pink
It's
Higgs.
funnier to have a grandpa named Pink
Yeah,
White.
you were
though.
talking about the tombstones. A guy told me one time, because in the Catholic cemetery down here, there are a lot of field rocks.
Yes.
And he told me, he said, you won't see any engraved headstones prior to about 1970, or I'm sorry, 1870 around here.
Mm-hmm.
He said prior to that, they didn't really have the technology to do that. He said they either had to hand hew them. He said, but they actually put them in with a air compressor. And he said, so the steam to run the compressed air, they just didn't have that here. And he said also a lot of people couldn't afford it. He
I would
said,
have
so they put
thought money would have
yeah,
been
they put old field rock out, and over the
That's
years
it.
it would just disintegrate because there's not limestone in this area. Everything's kind of a sandstone, and it just goes away. And so that's, you see a lot of that. There's a lot of old cemeteries around here that don't have stones. So
Yeah, a lot of them just had flat rocks,
right,
and that was it. So,
yeah. So you lived down there with your grandparents until you were up in your teenage years.
Preteen, and then I went lived with my dad, Unc, and lived with him for a while until his wife, Uncle Gene, my dad, he was married 8 times.
How many wives though?
7.
Married one twice.
He married my mother twice. Now here's a funny little story about Unc. I come back from Vietnam, and I had been sending money to my dad to save for me, when I got out. Another story. But he lived in Columbus, Indiana, and I went down there to Columbus from Indianapolis and to visit Dad, and found him back in the woods, shacked up with a woman and 3 kids. Anyhow.
So was he working for Cummins at the time?
At the time, he was working for Cummins.
Because that's where he retired, right? It
right.
was Cummins, like Cummins engines.
Yeah,
exactly.
Cummins Diesel.
He retired. And we went to a bar, and that's when Dad drank, and that's when I drank, and we're sitting there having a beer. He said, "Hey, you see that woman back there behind the bar? Yeah, she's our bartender. 2 months ago, she was your stepmother." Really? Yeah.
Hey, Mom.
Hey, Mom, how you doing?
She's like, was your stepmother?
Was. Yeah, he divorced one woman because she didn't pay the water bill.
Was it 3 weeks? He always said 3 weeks. Is that true? Or
That's
was that...
pretty close. He wasn't married a couple months.
Yeah.
I do remember that part.
Because she wouldn't pay the water bill?
She
Forgot it?
She forgot it or went out and.
Well, what he told me.
Well, if you can't
this is
trust
what he told
somebody, you
me.
can't trust them,
Well,
right?
that's
I mean-
that's what I was getting ready to say. So he told me that before they got married, they had decided what each other was going to pay. So, like, I'm going to pay the electric and the house insurance,
Yeah.
and you're going to pay the water bill and whatever. And so it come up in that 3-week period. The water bill was due, and she didn't have it, and she got $8 or $9 out of his wallet and paid the water bill. And he comes home and finds it, and he just divorces her. And I said, well, don't you think that was a little drastic, Unc? He said, if you can't trust somebody over $8, you can't trust them over nothing. I said, well, you might have a point.
That may be the truth of the story. Who knows?
Well, I'm not saying any of this is true. I'll just tell you it's true that's what Uncle Gene told me.
Exactly.
I'll just put it that way.
We'll testify to that. But he did. He married my mother twice. But I lived in Indianapolis for a while when I got back from Vietnam, got married, and, raised kids and did some traveling in my business. I traveled mostly the southeastern part of the United States.
What type of business did you have?
Well, most of it was sales management. Companies would hire me to go in and dissect their revenue department.
See what they were doing wrong and what they were doing right.
Where the money was going. And I got to be pretty good at it, so I was pretty busy and traveled a lot. But I owned a couple of the businesses after I looked and seen what they were doing wrong. And then just recently, my wife and I decided that we didn't want to be married anymore. Some people call it a divorce. We just was looking at each other one day and said, hey, you want to get a divorce? I looked at her and I said, because she's the one that asked me, I said, I think that's a good idea. So I moved back down to Sunfish. But I did. I spent 2 tours in Vietnam. And I was thinking about this today, we have a lot of great representatives here in Sunfish, Edmonson County, in the military.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I believe, and I think Kyle will correct me if I'm wrong.
I usually do.
You always do. I believe we lost 13 Edmonson County boys in Vietnam.
I don't know. I didn't know that number.
There's a monument at the courthouse
That's got it.
that's got for World War I, II, Korea, and Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that they
on
built
each side of
within
that
the last
obelisk.
5 years.
No, that one's been there for a while.
Okay.
So then they have another one that you can buy bricks for to honor your
I think
family
Martha
member.
may have bought one for John A.
Yeah,
and
there
Warren, I think's got one
Papa's
over there.
on
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went
Family
down to the
someplace on
Catholic
there.
cemetery one time before Memorial Day and took pictures of all the stones, and there are quite a few down there. Your generation, it was there was a lot. Our generation, there's really not. I mean, it's just a.
Well, and thank goodness for that.
Were you drafted, or where did you go?
No, I. That's a funny story. I had made up my mind when I was still in high school, and it was at the height of the Vietnam War. I was going to join, and my brother and I, he's younger than me. Dad had a farm in southern Indiana, and he wasn't married at that time. But we were having supper, and I had military on my mind, and I knew Dad had served in the South Pacific, and I always wanted to be a paratrooper. Ever since I was a little kid, Dad used to jump out of airplanes, and man, there was just...
Yeah, I didn't know that about Gene.
Mm-hmm.
I'd forgot it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a possibility.
Well, only real close friends knew.
He never taught you how to do a PLF?
PLF.
PLF.
Did he teach you, Bub?
No, but I've heard you tell that story.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
PLF.
Yeah.
But
Which is a proper way to fall when he knocks you down.
Well,
so there's a right way and a wrong way to fall for everybody who don't know what a
So he
PLF
just hit you
is.
down.
a PLF
Yeah. So
is
you
a-
fall on your face a couple times, and he's like, "Hey, if you'll do a PLF," and so he showed me one day, and it really helped.
Well, PLF is a parachute landing fall. That's what it stands for.
Yeah, but I've never had a
I
parachute.
saw that on the movies.
But I've
Yeah.
never had a parachute.
Right.
Yeah.
You didn't jump out of the bar
No,
to try it.
no.
But anyhow, we were eating supper, and I had this on my mind. And I said, Dad, I'm going to join the military. He just kind of nodded his head, and I said, now, what I'd like to know is, in your opinion, what would be the toughest branch to go into? he sat there for a few minutes, and this is a true story.
And you
guys.
mean to make you the toughest?
I was already the toughest, but I just wanted to go
You want to confirm it.
where the rest of them
Right.
were. You know,
Check
just to
them
find
out.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wanted it to be tough. But anyhow, he sat there for a few minutes, and he said, well, I'd have to say the paratroopers. He said, the paratroopers are a pretty tough group of guys. I said, okay, I'm going to be a paratrooper. And my little brother looked at Dad and said, Dad, what would be the easiest? We just kind of looked at each other because he was always a little sissy anyhow. I mean, you know, hey, call it like it is.
You didn't toughen him up?
No, and I'll tell you why I didn't. But anyhow, big mistake. He better thank God every day we can't relive our childhood. But Dad looked at him and said, well, I guess the Navy. He said, okay, I'm going to join the Navy. So I became a paratrooper in Vietnam, and he became a...
Be good.
Sailor.
I was trying to be good.
Sailor.
Is that...
That's proper term.
Okay,
Sailor.
Well, if I was at a bar with a bunch of other paratroopers, what I'd say was he was a squid. You know.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Go with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that'll...
But,
To be honest, that's better than what I thought it was.
Well, that's really better than what I was going to say, but since I know that Heather's probably listening, right?
Yes, she will be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Heather.
Keep that in mind.
Hi, Heather. How you doing, honey? But then when I came back, I remember right before we went into service, there was 4 of us guys just coming out of high school. All 4 of us was trouble. I mean, to tell you, if we're sitting around and one day one of them says, guys, we got to do something. I said, well, the law's already after us. What can we do? That was a joke. Let's join the Marine Corps. I said, I think that's a great idea. So we all 4 get in somebody's car, probably my 54 Oldsmobile, and drive down to the recruiting office in Indianapolis. Walk right up to the Marine. We had the Marine, the Navy, which are the same thing. For all you Marines out there, I'm sorry, but you were the Department of the Navy. And we're going to get some flack on this.
You might get some hate mail.
We'll get some hate mail on that one.
I'll just give them Colin's address.
Yeah, just give them my address. They'll know. They'll see the first cab flag flying, and they'll turn around and leave. But, you know, seriously, the Marines have got to have heroes, too. That's the reason God invented paratroopers. So we all go into the Marine desk there, and there's this old Marine chewing on a cigar. We want to join the Marines. So we start talking, and I looked at the recruiter, and I said, can you guarantee me jump school, paratrooper school? He says, no, but I can write it down, request it. And I said, no, that's not. One thing Dad told me before I joined, he said, whatever that recruiter promised you, make him put it in writing. So I looked at that Marine, I said, can you put it in writing? He said, no. He said, I can suggest it. I said, forget it. I got up. I walked across the hallway and looked at the Army guy, and I said, can you guarantee me jump school? He said, I can guarantee it. I said, will you put that in writing? He said, absolutely. I said, well, that was easy. What I found out was it's all volunteer anyhow, you know, so I could have volunteered when I got in. But the other 3 that joined the Marine Corps, one of them went AWOL in basic. One of them went AWOL 2 months after that. One of them went all the way to Vietnam, came home from leave, had about a year left in the Marine Corps, and he went AWOL. So all 3 of those guys washed out.
Yeah.
I went in, did my thing, not a black mark against me.
So you went through paratrooper school?
I went through paratrooper school and made the biggest mistake of my life before I went into jump school. And if any of you fathers or mothers have a son that wants to be a paratrooper, that's great. but tell him the story first. I'm with a couple of guys from Texas, and we are in this little town drinking beer. And we drank enough beer that everybody wants to go get a tattoo. So they go in there, and one of them gets a big old yellow rose of Texas, and one of them gets a big state flag of Texas, and I'm sitting there, I'm not getting no tattoo.
Well, you're not from Texas.
That's right. And I said, one of them said, "Hey, Whitey, aren't you going to get a tattoo?" I said, "Well, I am. Not from Texas? No." They said, "Well, aren't you going to go to jump school next?" And I said, "Yeah." "Well, why don't you get one of those paratrooper tattoos?" And I'm just drunk enough.
It seemed like a good idea.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. So I went ahead and I got it right here. Still got it. It ain't left. Right here on my right arm. Parachute wings. Paratrooper wings. So right before I get to go to jump school, one of the other guys said, "What are you going to do about that tattoo?" I said, "What do you mean, what am I going to do about it?" "You can't go to jump school with a paratrooper tattoo on. You got to get a tattoo after you graduate. They're not going to like this very much."
So you were proclaiming you were a paratrooper before you were a paratrooper.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But I was intoxicated. Remember that. I wasn't thinking clearly. But yes, that's right. So the very first day, you have 3 weeks of paratrooper school. You got ground week. That's where they separate the boys from the men. Ground week, they just run you to death. Second week, you got tower week. You do a lot of things, plus you jump out of a tower. And then the third week is jump week. Well, the first day, there's about 200 of us, brand new recruits, and it's a chilly day, but a pretty nice day. And we're going to start running. And we got these instructors, which are called black hats, and they are mean.
So were you in Texas at this school, or Georgia, or where
we
did
were
you go
at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Georgia, okay.
Fort Benning. And these black hats, and they're all of them about 6'3", 250, built kind of like that. Do push-ups on their fingernails.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Oh, yeah, we've
Been there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, don't let this fool you.
Oh, okay.
Dad bods.
Yeah, it's dad bod. Don't let it
Oh,
fool
you guys been through those before. Okay. Then you know what I'm talking about, right? Oh, Lord. Anyhow, one of the black hat instructors, he says, "Strip down from your waist up on the command of PT." I was going, bullshit. So we start taking our fatigue shirts off, and we got our OD T-shirts on, and my tattoo is brand new, so it's bright.
Oh, it's good.
It glows in the dark. And about that time, he said, "No, keep your shirts on." It was kind of a little too chilly. Oh, thank you, Jesus. So we run about 20 miles that day, and everybody gets back, and they "You're lucky. You're lucky that, they didn't see that tattoo." I said, "Okay, well, whatever." Next morning, it just happened to be a little bit warmer. And he says, "On the command of PT, strip down from your waist up." So I strip off, and there it is. Boom, like freon lights, just a glowing. And they all are standing up on like 3-foot platforms looking down at us. And we're standing at attention, and the black hat, he just kind of scopes around, keeps looking, and he scopes, and he goes, and he beams in on me. Them eyeballs were burning me.
You felt it.
Oh, man, I felt it. And he looked at me and he said, "You, front and forward." Oh, God, mercy heavens. So anyhow, I fall out and get in front of him, and he starts on me. He says, "Well, I see you've already been to jump school."
What are you doing back?
"No, sir, I haven't." He says, "Well, what idiot would put a tattoo of a paratrooper wings on their shoulder if they never went to jump school?" I said, "Well, that'd be me." And he said, "Well, I tell you what, we're going to give you a name. Your name's going to be Mr. Airborne. And every time you hear the word Mr. Airborne, you are to drop and give me 25 push-ups. Do you understand, Mr. Airborne?" So I drop and give him 25 push-ups. all day long.
How many do you think you did that?
Oh my God, I don't know. If I had to guess at 25, probably 3,000. Because we would be running, because ground week, all you do is run. That's all you do is run. And people would fall out, they'd flunk jump school. Well, I could not go through the rest of my life with an airborne tattoo on my shoulder and not graduate jump school.
Right.
But these guys knew, they wanted me to quit. And I had this little DI, and I'm almost ashamed to say this now, but he was, how big are you? You know, he wasn't quite, I thought you were supposed to be like 6'2". What are you, 2'6"? He was a smaller guy, but he was a mean beep, beep, beep. I mean, he was mean. And he'd run right alongside me, and he'd say, "Hey, Mr. Airborne." I'd have to fall out and give him 25 push-ups. "You getting tired?" And I have to fall back in formation and catch up. And then as soon as I get caught up, he'd holler Mr. Airborne again. So within a half mile, every time I ran a half mile, I probably did 100 push-ups. And we ran like 20 miles a day.
Yeah.
So it was the last day of ground week. And I got it made, because next week I go to Tower Week. And if I can get out, Tower Week. If I can get out of ground week, I think I can make it. And so finally it's the last day, and I can see that the group ahead is slowing down. They've got to the end of the line. I can make that. Well, he's telling me I can't, because Mr. Airborne, I'd fall out and do 25. And Mr. Airborne, he'd do 25, and he'd say, "You getting tired? You getting tired?" And I just kind of looked at him, and my mouth just opened up, had no control over it. And I said, "No, Sarge, but if you are, hop on."
Oh,
Bad mistake.
And he did.
yeah.
And he
They
did.
don't come out.
That's right.
He did jump on. And he jumped on. And then he jumped on. And I barely crawled to the finish line. So the next week was Tower Week. I said, "God, I can't do this again." So I took a bandage. I'm going to show you how smart I am. I was pretty sharp. I took this gauze. I put this gauze around my arm like a bandage. They can't see that. What I didn't know was all the black hats, they all shacked together. And every one of us had a number on our helmet.
So it was a different black hat at the tower.
Yes.
Okay.
So
but
I'm
they
thinking,
shacked together.
yeah, and I'm thinking, well, you know, they'll never find out. Hell, they knew about it the first day.
Yeah.
Hey, watch 139er. Write that down. 139er. He's got a tattoo on his right arm.
He goes by Mr. Airborne.
Yeah, he goes by Mr. Airborne. So I get to Tower Week, you know, and I think I'm really smart. And this captain comes up to me. And I got my fatigue shirt on and everything. And he says, "Soldier, come here." He says, "I want you to take your shirt off." And I'm thinking to myself, why in the world does he want me to take my shirt off? So I take my shirt off, and there's that big, nice bandage. He said, "What'd you do to your arm?" "Oh, I burned it on an iron." I was ironing my arm, sir.
I was ironing my shirt.
Now, you have to remember, I'm, 18, 19 years old. Scared to death. Was I what?
How long did you take to think that one?
It must have just come out.
Spur of the moment.
Yeah, just spare the moment.
Off the hip.
And what got me was he looked at me and he says, "If you damaged my tattoo, I'm going to court-martial you." I said, "How the hell do you know that?" So anyhow, I didn't get away with it the next week. But what they did is they put a parachute on your back. And instead of doing push-ups, you had to do deep knee bends. So there we go again.
So what did the parachute weigh? I've never had a parachute
Oh,
on my back.
I'd say it probably weighed about 15, 20 pounds, Wasn't too much, but you get into your 7,000 deep knee bend.
Deep knee bends are hard without weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here again, Mr. Airborne was called out a lot to me, and I had to do 25 deep knee bends. And I'm thinking my lot. I don't know if I can make it or not. But anyhow, I did. I made it through that and then graduated. And we had a second lieutenant in our squad in jump school, and the black hats always liked to mess with people, dummies like me, that had tattoos, and officers, because officers couldn't do nothing to them. You know, you could just chew up an officer and he couldn't do nothing if he was a student and you were the instructor.
Right, but outside in the normal army,
Oh,
the
yeah.
officer could bring it back.
I'm glad you brought that point up.
Yeah.
Because me and this captain, or this lieutenant, became pretty good buddies. You know, he felt sorry for me and I felt sorry for him because they picked on both of us. Well, we're walking across the parade field ground, and, you know, we got our our airborne wings on, and we got our airborne hat on, and we're strutting, you know, like, and all of a sudden, who do you think's coming across the other way? The black hat, the instructor that
Right.
used to jack with us. And the officer went up to him and made him lock his heels. You know, can you imagine what lock your heels mean? And he made him do 25 push-ups. Now, that wasn't as many as we did, but it was
It
kind
was
of
just
fun.
the point, yeah.
You know.
So, were you in like the 101st? What division were you in?
Well, I was never assigned to a division. I got my orders for Vietnam, and I was sent to the 1st Air Cav. You have airborne personnel in every unit. 101st Airborne Unit has a lot of people that are not airborne.
Okay.
But so you don't have to go to an airborne unit. You go to whatever unit needs you at the time. And the 1st Cav needed what I could do. They needed it the most. And I was in the processing part in Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon, Vietnam, processing in. And I got my processing orders, and it was to the 1st Air Cav. And I was going to be attached to the 2nd of the 12th. Now remember, the Custard's unit was the 1st of the 7th. I was in the 2nd of the 12th. So anyhow, I run across a guy I went to basic training with. He was working in the processors, you know, one of the guys, the clerks, you know, and we sat there and said hello to each other and all that, and how you doing, and great. And he says, who'd you get assigned to? And I said, I got assigned to the 1st Cav. And he had a look on his face like he just walked on a grave. I said, what's the matter? He said, Whitey, you're not going to make it. I said, what? He said, the 1st Cav, they don't. He said, you're not going to make it. I might as well just go ahead and write Mom.
Right.
Tell her I ain't going to make it.
Right.
But what I found out was the 1st Cav never played defense. They had all the helicopters in the world. They could load 40 guys in a helicopter, fly them out, and drop them right in the middle of a division of North Vietnamese regulars. And that's what they did. You know, if they knew that there was some activity in this area, they'd fly us in and we'd drop us right in the middle of it. You know, how about playing a little defense? Why don't we come back here? Nope, go out here, you go. We went after the enemy.
They wanted you all to soften them up.
I don't know what they wanted, just get killed, I think.
Right.
But that's what they did. They would send us out, and I have a lot of people ask me, because I was in the thick of it, but I have a lot of people ask me, what was the scariest part about Vietnam? And I can tell by the way they ask, they're expecting me to tell them about this hand-to-hand combat, which was scary, but not the scariest, or this mass wave of gooks coming at you, which that happened a couple times, but that wasn't the scariest part. The scariest thing that ever happened to me in Vietnam was we were out on operation and one of our radios was not working right. We had radios, they were called Prick 25s. And the captain, I was a platoon sergeant, and the captain asked me, said, Sarge, can you fly back to the rear, pick us up a new radio, and we'll meet you at this grid here. So he writes down the grid, hand it to me, and I said, oh, you mean I have to go back to the rear and get a hot shower and get a hot meal? Let me think about it, okay? So obviously I went, and you never went anywhere without your M16. You just didn't do it. So I've got my M16 and a bandolier of clips, 10 clips, with a 5.56, 18 rounds in each clip. And then I got one in my weapon. And an old radio that don't work. So I go back, get a new radio, get a hot shower that night, and get some hot chow. And then I go to what they call the landing pad, and usually on a little LZ or a big LZ, they have an area that the helicopters land. So I go up to one of the radio operators and said, hey, I need to get to this grid. Can you check with one of those choppers and see if they're going there? No problem, Sarge, give it to me. So I get down there waiting, and obviously he talked to one of the chopper pilots, and they gave him the, yes, we can do that, which they did, you know.
It's kind of like hitchhiking, wasn't it?
Kind of like hitchhiking, you know. There was no manifest, nobody yet.
Just catching a ride.
Just catching a
Very
ride.
informal.
Yeah.
So I happened to hop on a Chinook. That's the chopper with the propellers on both ends. And so I get back there in the back, and, you know, it's noisy, and I'm, you know, just probably singing to myself. And 45 minutes later, and I can tell the chopper's going down. So we get down, and the tailgate lowers down, and I run out of the chopper. Chopper takes off, throwing dust and dirt all over the place, and I kind of duck my head, and chopper flies out. And the dust settles, and I look around, and I'm on an old LZ, which I thought was a little bit odd. It was a nice, about the size of a football field, you know, perimeter 360. But I start thinking to myself, I don't think I'm supposed to be here.
So you're in the wrong spot.
I'm in the wrong spot. And I start thinking, oh, where am I? Well, I don't know it at the time, but I'm at an old Special Forces LZ that got ran over by the North Vietnamese, and everybody had to evacuate. It was right within a click or so, which is, a click is 0.6 of a mile, a kilometer, we call them clicks, to Cambodia. So I get on this brand new radio that works, and I start trying to call my unit. I'm too far out. I can't contact anybody.
So you're on this field by yourself, nobody around.
Nobody around in the middle of the
nobody
jungle.
will answer the radio.
Nobody knows where I'm at.
And the helicopters.
And how old are you at the time? 19?
19, 20. I was probably 20. I was probably 20 that,
Still.
because I was a platoon sergeant.
Still, you were young.
20.
20's young.
Yeah, 20 is really young. But, it's like Kyle said, Chopper's gone. I can never see him again. So I know I'm in trouble. But the nice thing about this LZ was it was really a nice LZ. They had nice bunkers that were dug out and had sandbags on them and everything. So I DD Mal right into one of them. DD Mal means go right now. And one thing I didn't bring because I didn't think I needed it was water. Now it's 110, 115 degrees.
Is this daylight or dark?
This was daylight
Okay.
when they dropped me off, and no water. And I'm trying for 4 or 5 hours trying to pull somebody up. Can't pull nobody up. So I know I'm lost. And I don't know if you've ever been lost, but, and I don't mean you have to stop and say, now where do I have to go? Oh, I'm talking about lost. I have no idea where I'm at, and I know for a fact that nobody else knows that either. And I'm thirsty. And I hear something. There's an old road that goes right by this LZ. And it's an old Papasan. an old Vietnamese man, probably a farmer, and he had a little wagon, a cart, and he had 2 oxen, water buffaloes, and he had a big stick and just walking. He had something in the back like maybe some sugar cane or something. And I'm thinking, I wonder if he's got any water. Because I'm really starting to get worried now because my mouth is swollen up and dry. So I said, what the heck, I'm going to go and take a chance. I get out of the bunker, and he sees me. Of course, I got my M16. And I walk up to him, and I don't know a lot of Vietnamese, but I know Nook. Nook means water. He had Nook. And, he nods, yeah, and he brought this little bag out, and it must have been a goat bladder or something. And he let me have a drink of it, and then he offered me to keep it. And there might have been maybe half a gallon of water in there. I thanked him, and then I went back and got into the hooch, one of the hooches, and then it hits me. How do I know who he is? He's going to go down to the next village, and he's going to tell the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese Army, whoever, that there's a dummy down at that old LZ. And they were going to come down, and they were going to kill me.
And no doubt they knew it was vacant because...
They're the ones that made it vacant.
The ones, right.
So, of course, that old cart's moving real slow, but I have to make a decision real quick.
Hey everybody, Colin's interview ran just a little long, so we decided we'd make it a 2-part. So you're definitely going to want to tune in next week to hear the rest of this one. We decided not to do any cooter tales because we didn't want to cut Colin short. Thank y'all for listening, and thank all our military veterans from the bottom of our hearts. Without y'all, we wouldn't enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy today. If y'all like our designs, look up my wife. She does all our design work. It's Hayes Farmhouse Design on Facebook and Etsy. Y'all have a great week, and come back and see us next week.